Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Are we ready with the webinar? Welcome to the PID webinar. My name is Nadeem Ul-Haq, here to moderate the PID webinar. Today we have a webinar on non-tariff measures, overall protection and export competitiveness, evidence from participant and regional countries by Irfan Aleem. Irfan Aleem is a former World Bank staff member, a well-known Pakistani economist. And exports are an important subject to think about. So let's begin. Over to you, Irfan Sab.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Nadeem. I hope you're well.
Bilkul theek, boliye.
Both myself and my co-author, Bushra Faizi, are here. And what we would like to outline here is a storyline. I think that is probably the best way to explain the context as well as the work that we have done and the results. So let me share with you also the screen. If I can, so you can see it. Okay, there you are. I'll put it into, okay. So you can see this. The story started, I think around January last year when I met you, Nadeem, also, and I had discussions in Washington as well as in Qatar. And the main concern was Pakistan's exports, which had remained largely unchanged in value terms in the past decade. They're stagnated and have performed poorly also relative to competitors, as you can see in this graph. This is a story, well-known story. And the discussions that I was part of, and also had the privilege of joining in, was that maybe this was originally some people thought this was due to tariffs. I'm sorry, tariffs. I mean, real effective nominal or real effective exchange rates, and this was poo-pooed a little bit because of the despite Pakistan's large devaluation, at least until January, February of 2020, there had been no impact. This is before the coronavirus. And then there were other ideas that were brought up, that maybe that this is the work of tariffs, and there was a lot of. I met Gonzalo, who was the World Bank senior economist in Islamabad, and we talked about the results that he had been coming up with. And as you can see, it's there were obviously one of the tariffs which averaged 12.6% in 2018 were among the highest in the world. And a major point was being made by the World Bank and others that this could be the major reason why exports were stagnating. Other factors were also mentioned at that time, including the business environment, infrastructure, the regulatory environment. And, you know, we talked about this also. And the protection was enhanced by the cascading effects due to the differential between tariffs on consumer goods and raw materials. Pakistan also, as a result, Pakistan also has a high effective protection rates. So at that time, we were in the discussions. We were identified a under-researched area, and both the Minister of Finance and Gonzalo himself had given me a paper by New et al. On non-tariff measures, which could have been other. So we spent, that was basically that triggered the work that I've been doing with Bushra for the last 12 months on non-tariff measures, and seeing what role can they explain this conundrum about why Pakistan's exports have stagnated. Essentially, and so we have learned a lot about it, and I'm trying to again tell you a story and very clearly what we know and what we don't know, and you will see that. But basically, non-tariff measures, as you may well know, are policy measures other than non-tariffs that can potentially have an economic effect on international trade in goods, changes in quantities or prices. This is the UNCTAD definition. We can talk about it. I think earlier on, as economists talked a lot about non-tariff barriers. This is a more enhanced version. And in fact, the mass classification system for non-tariff measures, which was set up by UNCTAD, broke this category of measures into 16 chapters, and then further broke them up. Sorry, these chapters, these non-tariff measures can be differentiated into 16 chapters, and this can be further broken up into 150 categories. Mm-hmm. And you can see that broadly speaking, they are separated into technical measures and non-technical measures. The technical measures are A, B, and C. The chapters A, B, and C. They're chapters. Yeah. Sanitary and phytosanitary measures, technical barriers to trade, pre-shipment inspection. And similarly, non-technical measures are there, ranging from price control measures to anti-dumping measures, anti-competitive measures, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really the basis for understanding the technical, the non-tariff measures. This is the clarity in terms of what this means. Now, out of this 150 types of NTM measures, 4 categories of NTMs are considered as critical by UNCTAD. And these 4 categories are price control measures, quantity restrictions, technical measures, and monopolistic measures. And they themselves can be broken up into different chapters. For example, price control can be broken up into administrative measures affecting customs value, voluntary export price restraints. Similarly, quantity restrictions can be broken up into prohibitions and restrictions on imports for a variety of reasons. And I'll come back to them. SPS reasons, which we go down below, we'll see it, or anti-dumping measures, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have also technical measures, which is the standard, most well-known category, which is, I said, category A, B, and C, which is chapter A and B, C, which covers sanitary and phytosanitary measures, technical barriers to trade, and pre-shipment inspection. And again, we can go into more depth later on. Let me go further. Okay, so let me outline the approach we have followed, and that Bushra and I have followed. And as I said, I will try to cover the approach, the results and conclusions in about 30 minutes, and then we can have more detailed discussions of individual issues. Now, the basic approach is split up into 3 steps. The first step is that the overall idea is that there is a theoretical foundation for the study, is the model which is based on trade theory, which accommodates both tariffs and non-tariff measures in an N-good, N-factor general equilibrium model. And then the approach is in 3 steps. The first step is to quantify the impact of non-tariff measures and tariffs on imports and estimate the value of the impact on imports. The second step is the quantity impact is transformed into price effects, the AVEs, using import demand. Import demand elasticities. And then the third step is to look at the overall protection estimated as a sum of the tariffs and AVEs, which is the tariff equivalent of NTMs. Now, going a little bit more deeper into these 3 areas, the basic approach is to look at estimate the impact of imports, or the impact of characteristics, NTMs, agricultural subsidies, and tariffs on the imported quantity. This is basic equation 1. This was originally derived by Key et al. In their very fundamental paper in 2009 in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. There were some mistakes, or you can say clarifications that were needed in their approach, theoretical approach, and Bushra and I had a lot of interaction with Key, and we revised it, and you will see this in the paper that we have published on PID website. The second, and we can go into those characteristics later. The second stage is, in this first stage, not only do you estimate the demand, but you estimate the impact of these, particularly very important is this beta core NC. And the impact or the estimate of the impact of core NTMs on imported volumes, which is beta core NC, is obtained by estimating equation 1 using nonlinear least squares regression. Now this second, so this is again an approach that was then New et al. Adopted this approach that done was by Key, and estimated the estimated results for the AVs of NTMs or the tariff equivalent NTMs using equation 7, which is, as you can see, is very clearly defined, and we can come back into the details. Now, they did it for 100 countries, but at a very macro level. Bushra and I extracted some of the results, both for Pakistan and more detailed results for Pakistan, as well as for the comparator countries, and which will come to that. The third stage is we did entirely on our own, which is the overall protection tariffs. We estimated the tariffs and the AVs, combined them together for Pakistan. And then we, at the second step, the fourth step.
Can you, I might have missed that, but can you go back and explain all the variables carefully? मुझे वो equation ठीक नहीं समझ आ रही.
Which one?
ये जो MNC, for example, you say is the unit value, import value of good, and evaluated.
Are you talking about equation 1?
Equation 1.
So L log of MNC is the MNC is the import value of the good in country C evaluated exogenous prices, which are normalized to unity so that import quantity is equal MNC. And this is seen as a function of, as you can see, country characteristics.
You're saying
C and
all prices are normalized to unity, or what does that mean?
That's right. All prices. This is a very important. Process that is used, normalized to unity so that import quantities equal to MNC. So you start with import values, but then you normalize in the assessment, normalize them to unity so that import quantities equal MNC. Okay, and then again we can look at, if you want, I can go into more detail about the characteristics, which is looking at the point of comparative instead of using a gravity model.
Okay, and what is CK?
CK is our country characteristics. So it's looking at the comparative advantage of the country in terms of relative of the capital, labor, and land as a percentage of GDP, the size of the economy, and some also at least two variables which have a gravity function, which is for islands you put the CK becomes 0. 0 and 1 is a binary variable, and and then also the last one is to look at the weighted average of the distances between the countries and your partners in terms of where you are, the partners which you are trading. So that's how the CK is. The core NC are the core variables, that the core NTMs that we were talking about. L and DSNC relates to the subsidies that are provided, the impact of subsidies, and the impact is actually measured. The subsidies are measured in dollar terms. And then ENC is the import elasticity, and T is the ad valorem tariffs, and then KNC is the error term.
Okay.
And we can go into more depth. We can explain this to you. So there was an error. There was an issue. Well, you can call it an error. You call it a clarification. That we had a long discussion, and then we actually showed the results more clearly in the work that we've done in our paper.
Okay.
And then because with the manipulation, that's what you estimate that, and that's how you come up with equation 7. There was a problem in how how they derived equation 7. But that is the key equation which works out the AVE based on on import elasticities.
Okay.
Okay. Now the other step we also did was to work out the frequency index and the coverage ratio. It gives an idea of the incidence of it, the coverage or the incidence of NTMs. The frequency index measures the percentage of imported products, the number of imported products affected by at least one category of core NTMs, one. Whereas the coverage ratio is the share of imports that are affected by at least one category. So there's that basic fundamental difference. One is looking at the percentage and the other is looking at the value terms covered by. And I will not go into the equations, but that's how you estimate them out. And we estimated these using WITS database. And we did it also for Pakistan for going back to 1967. So here is, so now we start moving into the results. And the first question that people ask is, where is the problem? Where is the issue? So we looked very carefully at it. And we found that data suggests that imports are subject to a very large number of regulations in Pakistan. And top 10 most applied non-tariff measures on imports in Pakistan in 2015 are listed below, according to the frequency index. For example, E322. This is the prohibition for political reasons not importing from Israel or not importing from India. And if you can see, the coverage is 100%. Then you look at item B7, which is the product quality and safety of performance requirements, prohibition of used, repaired, manufactured goods, which is almost 13% of the imports are covered in that. And then labeling requirements, which is again which is very important. Again, a restriction that about 11% of all goods are subject to this type of NTMs. Now, I think one of the important issues that we will be faced with when you are leaving, what does this mean? And we'll come back to, we can explain to you what each one of them, it is this it's a very high level, it's a regulation. And to assess this, the custom people have to go through enormous lengths to be able to work this thing out. And that raises prices. I will come back to that. So these are the top 10. Now, here is our estimation of the results. So here is first of all, what we did was to look at the incidence of the core NTMs that have and you can see that they've remained relatively unchanged between 2003 and 2006. As you can see, look at both the frequency index and the coverage ratio remain relatively low. TM is the technical measures, QC are quantity control measures, and then if you combine them all, you have all core NTMs. And you can see that they were relatively low. And then suddenly, 2015, you see the jump. It's you are talking about a coverage ratio of about 70% for all NTMs. That 70% of the value of imports are covered by at least one NTM. Now, so that brings us to again, we examined a lot and we tried to understand, and Bushra did a great job in trying to understand where this is coming from. And what we did was that we found out that almost half, what's the source of the problem, Nadeem? Almost half of the NTMs covering imports in Pakistan between 1967 and 2015 were introduced after 2013. And almost so this was the new NTMs, as you can see there on the left-hand side. But then equally important, perhaps more important, that the products that are affected by NTMs, that were existing NTMs or new NTMs, the number of coverages, look at the increase. They all started in 2013. And so you had almost, about 11, is it 10,000, almost 11,000 of the products that were covered were introduced after 2013. Compared, total was 18,000 from 1967 to 2015. So this coverage represents new products subject to existing or new new core NTMs introduced that year. And that is very fundamental. Now you'll see the result also. And you see this result very clearly if you, this is our average NTMs. This is our estimation of NTM. NTM protection, as I said, is the tariff equivalent of NTMs. And you can see tariff NTM protection increased substantially in the agriculture sector between 2003 and 2015. And you can see the green bars represent the 2015 AVEs, and the blue bars were 2003. And you can see the protected sector was the vegetable product sector, followed by live animals. And this was the tariff equivalent of NTMs again. So very large jump between 2003 and 2015. This is the agriculture sector. Next we did for manufacturing. And again, you see this very large jump between 2003 and 2015. 2003 is almost zero. You see in almost places. But 2015, they started jumping up, optical, and I think I forget the second part of it, the instruments. Instruments were the tariff equivalent was about 102%, whereas the rubber and plastics were probably were around about 72%. Now, again, let me remind you that NTMs are showing what is the impact of what this AVE is doing, is showing the impact of the NTMs on prices, domestic prices. So this is what the impact of prices were. It's a very large increase. And again, the increase was very large from 2003 to 2015. So what we are, this is a summary that we have done. We looked at overall protection. So in Pakistan's NTMs have evolved as a much more, what seems to be very clear to us, that the data is showing there is a much more important source of protection than tariffs over the years. Now you can see this in the first three columns on the left-hand side, which is the simple averages. And you can see in the year 2003, the tariff equivalent of NTMs was only 1.06%. The tariffs were 16.9, almost 17%, and the overall protection was 18%. Now swing to 2015. Then here the tariff equivalent of NTMs, that means about 55% compared to tariffs of 12%, the overall protection became 67%. You get the same picture if you look at import weighted average, the slight change. But here you're talking, what you are seeing is that on average 55, the prices of imports went up 55% as a result of the imposition of NTMs compared to 12% from tariffs. And these are again in terms of direct output, not in terms of value added, which will be much higher. So what we did, again, we said, okay, this is enough, but what we need to look as increase in average, what we look at the comparator countries. And what we are seeing is that the increase in the average AVs of NTMs with the tariff equivalent for Pakistan is more than 10-fold higher compared to regional comparator countries. So if you look at the, in the Pakistan case, you can see in 2003, the AVs of NTMs was very low in 2003. It jumped to very high level, and you can see the ratio. It was 31. The increase was 31-fold in 2015 for agriculture goods, 54%, 54-fold, not 54% in the case of manufacturers, and for all sectors, average 52%. This is much higher than other countries. Now you can see what is happening is that the other countries introduced their NTMs earlier, much earlier. So they had time to adjust, to regularize, to harmonize their NTMs with trading partners, and to regularize, to see also what is critical and what is the necessity of NTMs. But we didn't have the time. We are catching up now, but it's very late in the day, and we have had a major impact on this. And you can see, for example, Vietnam. Look at the ratio. Look at the values that they have. The ratio is 0.87, 1.65, and 1.53 compared to our figures. Okay. So now let us draw your attention to an exacerbating factor. we have estimated the tariff equivalent of NTMs for goods only. Okay, the available evidence, because it is again a massive exercise, suggests that NTMs and service imports also substantially increase the cost of Pakistan's exports. What they do is that the NTM services impose an immediate cost on the exporters of goods and the services that use their services. And that's really how, now you can look at it, in communications, what does this mean? If we look at 2000, this is done by CEPI, a French premier outfit. And as you can see in Pakistan, as a result of NTMs on communication, Pakistan's prices in this area are 87% higher than the world's most competitive country. In the case of sea transport, 108%. Financial services, 109%. So all this thing means that the cost of for the goods for the exporters, these products are, these services are costing more money. It affects the cost of their services. Now, the conclusion from this chart is that it's important is to say the average cost of key services in Pakistan increased by around 88% due to NTMs. In the case of Vietnam, the results are available, 54.5%. India, 72.8%. So they are much lower. In Sri Lanka, 86.6%. This is the data that we have available. And the reason why it's important is very clear. World Bank has done an estimation. Their most recent to show that the services account for 59, almost 60% of Pakistan's overall exports in terms of value added. So, aapko pata chal jayega. Look at the impact. You can see, obviously going to be, if the services are going to cost more, it's going to have an impact. Okay. Next, we go to, so what are the conclusions? That's really, we are coming down. What is the bottom line? So inclusion, based on the analysis of the data that we have, that we spent 1 year doing this work, the incidence and intensity of core NTMs and overall protection increased substantially over time, especially after 2013. And we're not getting political on this, but this is the reality, even though tariffs have continued to decline over this period. Number one. Number two, NTMs dominate tariffs in overall protection and have had price rating effects, averaging almost 55% in 2015. And again, remember, this is in a sense, unlike tariffs, these are invisible. You know, you see the prices going up. There's no tariff there, so you can't fight that. And we'll come to that issue again. The increase in AVEs of NTMs between 2003-15 for Pakistan were almost 10 times higher than for regional comparator countries. The comparator countries introduced NTMs much earlier and had more time to adjust streamlined regulatory processes, and Pakistan is playing catch up late in the day. Fourth, the available data suggests that the average cost of key services accounting for almost 60% of the export in terms of value added is increased by around 88% due to NTMs. This is again much higher than for comparator countries. So where do we come out? What the policy implication kya hai? Iska policy yahi hai to enhance export competitiveness, government should streamline the regulatory processes, reassess. You know, we're talking about carrying out a regulatory impact assessment. And it's not a simple thing as to just reduce it's much more complicated. As you know, you and I have discussed these regulatory issues, Nadeem. But what you need is a reassessment of the coverage and necessity for individual NTMs and harmonizing them with trading partners. And then the last three, what we are saying is that simplifying NTMs and streamlining regulations will also reduce pressure on domestic prices and ease inflationary pressures. So let me end there. It's about just taken about 25 minutes, and we can go into more depth on any particular issues that you're interested in.
No, I think that's a very good presentation. I really like it. But let me ask you a few questions. And please, folks, raise your hands, whoever wants to participate. You said that Pakistan came late to the NTM regime and is now catching up with others. Does that mean these NTMs are necessary? Can we find out how many of these NTMs are necessary? How many of them are just bureaucratic sort of ploys to get bribes or whatever? I mean, how many of these things are genuinely necessary NTMs, or how many of them are just purely extraneous bureaucratic things? Like, for example, in cars, we have to buy cars on a baggage scheme, right? And they keep fiddling with the baggage scheme, whether the baggage scheme is like, for example, whether you can buy a 3-year-old car or a 5-year-old car. And then
Right.
it scheme also whether you can, I can buy your baggage claim, or I cannot buy your baggage claim. Or then again, whether if I buy your baggage claim, will you buy the car? Will I buy the car? So those are all NTMs that they keep playing around with. So the question is, if you're saying catch up, then that means that these NTMs are necessary and they should be put in place. Or are these NTMs not necessary? Can you comment on that?
I think this is a very important point, and we've struggled with this also. Basically, what is needed is, it's not a simple case of Pakistan saying ये tariff हटा दो, गिरा दें इसको, इसका कम कर दें आप. What you really need is to do what is called, in the more, if you want, the research unit, a research complex like yours or someone else needs to do what is called a regulatory impact assessment. First of all, you need to look at the key. There are, as I mentioned to you, if you can, there are about, here is there are more than 18,000 products covered. So आप सब तो नहीं कर सकते हैं, but what you can do instead is to look at the top 6 or 8 or 10 products. उसके आप, and I will show you that, and I will ask Bushra to show you the exact उसका नाम क्या है. You will see that particularly for cards. Okay, what is needed is to look at the you need to look at the NTM very carefully and decide, is it necessary, and if it's necessary, what can you do to simplify it. ये सबसे बड़ी चीज है. It's a much more, it's like, I suppose, a broad regulatory issue, but it's that you really need to look very carefully at what's going on. I think वो जो आपने जो बात की थी ना, for ये देखें आप इसमें I can't see this, but over here you can see this is there. Oops, I think this item B31 जो है labeling के अंदर ना, yeah, 833, it looks at whether or not you should, the licensing of motor vehicles, and we can see this in the back. So clearly what is urgently needed is a regulatory assessment, what NTMs are necessary, and because some of them are necessary, we know, for looking at the quality of goods, it affects the health of the country, health of the people. So you need to look at those and see whether they're necessary, and if they are necessary, what was necessary, what's not necessary. If it's not unnecessary, and just to put in my own word on it, India or Israel से आ रहा है, अब आप हर चीज को आप 100% चेक करेंगे कि आप उसे सर्टिफिकेट लाओ कि दिखाओ कि भाई ये चीज इंडिया से आई है. Maybe not, if the very few people are importing from India and Pakistan, तो क्यों इतना जबरदस्त regulatory process हो. तो you need to check on this thing, कि एक sample हो कि भाई क्या जरूरत है इसकी. So that is, I think, is very important, and we can show you the regulation, very clearly the regulation. So again, I think that is something that Razak Dawood department, ministry should need to do with you. इसको इसका regulatory assessment करें and try to find a way to simplify NTMs, particularly for those relating to exports.
Okay, let me take some questions from the floor. Noor Hira.
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
Sir, very good research by authors. Sir, I have questions from Sir Irfan. Sir, he used quantification technique, frequency index and coverage ratio. On the basis of which technique he will conclude like this measure is more protective, and this like if one frequency index show like positive impact and coverage ratio will show negative impact, on which technique we will suggest conclusion? We will suggest that this is.
Go ahead, Irfan.
May I answer this, sir? if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
mind.
go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead, answer.
Okay, so you are asking basically, according to my understanding, that these two measures, how can we decide based on the results coming up from these
Yes.
two measures? So
Yes,
they're complementing each other. They are not deviating from each other. For instance, if we are talking about the frequency index, we are looking at the number of imports that are subject to NTM. So in the coverage ratio, we are talking about the value of those products that are subject to those NTM. So they cannot, there is no way that they will deviate. They will complement each other. For instance, if the coverage ratio is high, the frequency index is high, then the coverage ratio will also be high, because the products that are subject to NTM, those values of the import we are catching in coverage ratio.
but I have learned in many papers they use both techniques, but at the end they prefer frequency index because they say like coverage ratio includes the endogeneity of weights problem, so they prefer frequency index. So what's your take on it?
So I don't know which approach you are talking about, because frequency is a very general term when you are calculating it. So we are specifically following the techniques from the literature review that are specifically applying these formulas for the NTM specifically.
I also
So
use uh, I also use both techniques. In the end results, I got results like this. Um, TBT, like a technical barrier to trade, have a negative impact through frequency index, but positive impact through coverage ratio. So I don't know how to interpret that results.
okay.
I got that problem.
So did you, let me ask you, did you use the same formulas what professor was
Yes,
explaining in
yes,
this slide?
yes, bilkul same.
So how did you calculate? What software you were using?
E-views.
Okay. So I don't know
That's
how it's more of like a technical assistant that you are asking,
Tell
right?
you, Bushra, what you do is send her your email address or whatever, and the two of you can talk about this because these are
Yes,
technical issues.
yes,
okay, sir.
doctor.
And I
Thank
think
you
it's
so much.
very
That's
important,
fair.
Noor,
That's
that you
fair.
talk to Bushra. I think
Thank you.
it's an important issue. Researchers should collaborate. This is what our purpose is. So please do talk to each other. So Bushra,
Thank you
आप
so
लोग
much.
That's
share
right.
कर लें इनसे and talk to each other. Okay. Great.
I'll do that. I'll do that
Nadeem,
in
can I
these
just
days.
add one small thing, because we struggled a lot with these estimation of frequency ratio, frequency index and coverage ratio. और हमारे पास भी originally बड़े अजीब से result आ रहे थे. But then we learned that we were making mistakes in this thing, and Bushra has learned a lot from this thing. And I think if Noora wants to contact Bushra, तो वो हो जाएगा. Then help
I
कर
think that's very fortunate. I'm
Thank
very
you so much, sir.
Yes, because researchers should talk to each other. So this is very fortunate. Please, girls, talk to each other. It's very important you help each other. That's how Irfan will tell you. That's how we used to work all our lives. It's important to help each other. Comments improve each other's work. So that's great. Acha ji, Adil Saab. Adil. Adil is there?
Yes, yes. Adil Malik from Oxford University.
Yes.
A very interesting presentation. I enjoyed thoroughly. As Dr. Nadeem would know, I've been doing slightly similar work for Egypt and Morocco, and now contemplating doing some work on Pakistan, exactly on these lines. So it'd be good to have your email addresses as well. As Nadeem was saying, it's good to cooperate. My main question is about sort of endogenizing NTMs. So one of the things I've learned through my work on the Middle East is that both in Morocco and Egypt, this wave of NTM introductions was triggered by EU trade agreements, because once you're part of the trade agreement, you have to sort of engage with regulatory harmonization. Sometimes it's part of becoming, conforming with other FTAs, WTO specific regulation. So in the Pakistani context, my sense is that a lot of this wave is driven by the EU GSP Plus scheme, right? 2012, it comes into motion. And then 2013, we see a huge wave of NTMs, which my sense is largely driven by the sort of EU agreement that we have. Another way of endogenizing is that once we have these waves, particular interest groups tend to go for compensatory form of protection. So in both Morocco and Egypt, we found that as tariffs fell, insider interest groups use these regulatory waves to compensate themselves with non-tariff measures, and thereby reaching a stage where fall in tariffs is more than compensated by increase in NTMs. Therefore, the overall level of protection either marginally increases or remains almost the same. So some more information on what is driving this increase. My sense is the EU GSP Plus scheme, but there could be other FTAs involved. So that's one. The other is a comment really adding to what you've been describing so far. When we say we need to have regulatory assessment, I think the key point about NTMs is that they are, they involve enforcement. And that's where there could be selective enforcement. That's where custom authorities, inspections regime kicks in. Wherever you have more administrative oversight for seeing whether those labeling requirements or conformity assessments are taking place, that adds to the cost. So anything that kind of simplifies this regulatory inspection or enforcement regime. So it's more about what regulations we can simplify, but also about how we could have a more consistent and predictable enforcement of these regulations. These 2 points, and again, I've got now Bushra's email, so I'll also connect with her and share some of the work that I've done on the Middle East.
Good, good. Ji, boliye, Irfan Saab, anything?
First of all, my email address is, Bushra also has it, but it's very straightforward, ialeem@gmail.com. I for Irfan, and then Aleem, ALEEM, @gmail.com. So you can, I'll be very happy to talk to you. I think one of the most important things is to know the limits of what you know and what you don't know. And so we'll be very happy to share with you because we've gone through this journey over the last year. The second thing is that I did a lot of extensive work for Morocco with Oliver Cadeau. Oliver Cadeau was the person who's been on the forefront of NTM estimation, and he did some NTM estimation for us also for Morocco. And it was very clear that in the case of Morocco, NTMs had declined. The impact of NTMs had declined substantially between I think 2011 when he first did his work compared to say 2002 or 3, and he looked at the prices of products from the World Bank database, and he worked that out. So his argument was that yes, these things are important, but he was not able to, because of what his analysis was showing that they've actually declined. He said they were still higher than Algeria, not Algeria, but Tunisia, and therefore, what is more important is that you need to the regulations need to be looked at in terms of subsidies in the budget, and he focused a lot in the work, and I can share that work with you on looking at how you could enhance the regulatory process to improve the linkage with the EU, because there was as you know, there's a very complex relationship between EU and Morocco, and they've been very successful so far. So, but that brings to the underlying, the issue that you've raised here is about the drivers of NTMs actually apply more to Pakistan and broadly, because it's very clear that लोग बहुत शोर मचाते थे कि tariff बहुत है, ये है, वो है, Pakistan के tariffs. You see, what countries have been doing is that they have this whole liberalization debate has been used, has been affected, offset by these countries by using NTMs. So they're exactly right. You're right that they've used NTMs to achieve protection. Now, I have not done the political economy of NTMs, but this is very clear that it may well be whether it was the EU that triggered all this thing, or whether it was the local mafias here which did it, or whatever it is clear that when you have more than 11,000 or 18,000 products being covered suddenly from 2013 to 2015, this raises the question, कि ये क्यों हुआ? And I think this is very critical to look at that. But I think this is overall, सारे countries में हुआ है. They have, because this is invisible, they have been doing this for protection, for creating protection, and that needs to be addressed. finally, the issue of selective enforcement, I think it's a very good idea. But again, in Pakistan, there's a lot of corruption. So I would be careful about this thing, what they try to enforce and what they, but I think that what would be good is to have an objective assessment by a team, say, led by Nadeem, and to see, you can look at, what is it, what are the, you don't need to look at 150 NTMs. All you need to look at is the 10 or 15 or 12 large NTMs, the important NTMs, and we can show you, Bushra can share with you we can show you the annex they're there. It's very clear, it's very difficult, it's very onerous. So I would suggest that at first there should be some type of a regulatory assessment, and then you take just the top 10, 12, discuss this with the Ministry of Commerce, and try to address ways of how you could make it simpler.
Good, great. Acha ji, Ariba Fatma.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Actually, it's my daughter's name. I couldn't change it.
Achha,
Thank you, Irfan sir, for a very Mahmood Khalid, sir, from Pride. My question to Irfan Saab is that can we consider all NTMs for the trade protection concerns? Because once we read the WTO details in terms of what the actual NTMs are about, the technical barriers to trade, the phyto and phytosanitary measures, and all others, weren't they supposed to protect the trade? So can we really put all the NTMs in just one category, that the country which is applying them are really trying to do something which is anti-trade? There might be certain reasons for these to be applied for the real protection of what actually is coming in their own country.
So did I understand you correctly that there are some NTMs, like for example the one dealing with phytosanitary measures, which are of importance to Pakistan also. You're trying to make sure that disease doesn't come in Pakistan. So those are positive, but there are some others. All of them are introduced for positive reasons. But if you apply them, but the question is, do you really need, as Nadeem was saying, do you need them all? Or can you reduce it? Now, for example, I was looking at the third category, which is E316, prohibition of used, repaired, or remanufactured. This applies to almost 15 to 16% of all imports. This, I presume, includes motor cars. So the question is really, do you need to do all this thing? Do you, I'm sure that bureaucrats would love it to have another way. I see this happening in the Middle East also, that the bureaucracy is a big, really nightmare. But I think it's very important to again, without doing a regulatory assessment, it's very difficult to make a general statement that ये इस चीज को हटा देना है. All we can do from this research is telling us is that this is a major, has a major impact on Pakistan. It's invisible and it's adding to protection, and there's something needs to be done. But I think it would be wrong for us to be able to just simply say कि नहीं ये सबको हटा दो, which is the very easy thing to do, to deregulate completely.
Fair enough.
Exactly. Thank you.
गाड़ियों के बारे में ये कहते हैं ना, for example, these people tell us on cars, they don't import a 10-year-old car, because you can't import more than 3 years old car. But unfortunately, I have a 10-year-old car. I've always had a 10-year-old car in DC, which is way better than my Honda in Pakistan. So what do we do? So anyways, Ariba Abdul Saqib, I think. Abdul Saqib.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, myself, I am Abdul Saqib. I am a PhD scholar at University of Science Malaysia, in Malaysia. Actually, my question is from the methodology section. As you mentioned, that you use the non-linear least square method. But recently, I was reviewing the literature because I'm working on the gravity model. Okay, so the point is, how can you deal with the zero trade flows if you are taking the log of the imports, as you mentioned that you are taking the log in the equation, and at the same time, what about the multilateral resistance? Does the non-linear least squares take into consideration the zero trade flow and the multilateral resistance adequately, or we have to find other approach? So can you please explain on this approach? The first question. And the second question of mine is, as your presentation was a very good presentation, and the NTMs which you pointed out is the major thing from which we can improve our exports. My point is, as you already also mentioned about the agriculture sector and the manufacturing sector. So what about the energy sector? As we know that Pakistan is almost in the energy crisis, and the imports is almost equal to 51% of the Pakistan. Of all imports of Pakistan is, I think, around 51%. And at the same time, it's using as an input to the export sector. So, and Pakistan is going to import also some of the energy products. And the third thing is that, are you suggesting somehow for the Pakistan to have the regional trade agreements, like Pakistan have only 5 trade agreements, the free trade agreement and the preferential trade agreement. Like Pakistan have only 5 trade agreements, except the SEPTA, which is not in function, like the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, which is also not function. So can you put some light on these questions?
Yeah. Well, on the first question, it's very straightforward. I think it's a technical issue. It's a complex technical issue. Why don't we discuss this separately on a bilateral basis, and we can talk, because we didn't use the gravity model, and in fact, the Key et al. Have proposed using a gravity model, and we looked at the 2016 paper. I would suggest you can look at that paper, and then we can talk about what that would mean in terms of the process. Clearly, the estimation process needs to be revised to take that into account. Now, I would, as I said, I would much rather that we have a more bilateral discussion on this complex issue. The second issue on the energy, let me just let me actually for both the second and third point, and maybe I didn't fully understand this thing, but if you are talking about exports from Pakistan, this is very critical, that exports from Pakistan, like if Pakistan is exporting textile products to the US, and I spoke to exporters, and they said that they need to, we do not have an internationally recognized process for a laboratory here which can evaluate our and give a certificate for the quality of our product, or whether it's using certain chemicals which are barred. And as a result, because they don't have it, they have only two alternatives: go to Spain or somewhere else to get their assessment, which takes time and is costly, or third, sell the product at a low price to a second quality. So that is the problem that they are facing, which we don't want to do. Now, I'm not quite sure whether this applies to the issue of you're talking about some biological products, but clearly there is going to be an NTM related to that, and they'll be covered by NTMs. And we need to look at what NTMs are specifically applied and assess those NTMs again. Without that assessment, it'd be very difficult to see what. I don't know whether, Bushra, do you have you seen some NTMs relating to biological products?
Yes, Professor, to answer that question, actually, we didn't explain much about what products we are taking and how they are categorized into groupings. So if they can read the paper, that the groups that we are using, that doesn't include any of the energy products. So for instance, we have the coding system from 1 to 96 codes and 18 product groups that are mainly in two categories, agriculture products and industrial products. So I don't see any fuel imports or anything that is falling in those categories. So on energy sector, I don't have any comment on that.
But Bushra, I'm looking at the table on slide 20, and it talks about mineral products with 34.8% and chemical products 36.6%. Now I'm just wondering whether the energy products will fall in that category?
The mineral product, they were mostly for the scientific research that they are doing in the labs, for instance, in universities and agriculture labs and all those labs that they need these things. And they exempt some of those for the purpose of R&D. But there were no like fuel included in that.
So basically, there are very few products which we can see that where NTMs are applied to energy products. But it may well be that there are some other they may be using different types of energy products. You know, the new types of that which are using you know, like methanol and all that. Those may be subject. They may have some problem. They may come under chemical products. But I'm not quite sure whether normally LNG and oil would come under these categories. But I think we can have a look at this and we can get back to you on that.
Idris Khaja. Idris sir.
Irfan sir, can you try and give us some examples of specific NTMs in specific sectors? And as you said that some NTMs are but essential, so can we estimate the impact of some specific NTMs so that the policymakers know that if these are taken care of, there would be an improvement?
ये जो हमने निकाला हुआ है, we have done about 96 product groups. And that is quite
sorry to cut you, but I think the question is about as we are showing that, as you suggest earlier, that the top 10 NTMs and mostly top 5 that they need to be addressed urgently. So can you show them in the annex that we put down the first 5 NTMs for Pakistan, that what they mean in wordings? I think that's what Professor is asking.
Is that what? Okay. I don't. Do you want me to share the? Can I share the Nadeem? Can I share the again? Okay. Let me just try to share that thing again. Where is that? Let me see. Can you see this right now? Okay. Is it visible? Or do I have to? No, I think you have to allow me to share it.
I'm sure that
you are already allowed, sir.
Yeah, can you see this thing right now?
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
This one now?
No, not yet.
No, I'm
Sir,
just trying to see.
Share it again. Share it again, sir.
I'm trying to. Yes, I'm not very good about the. There it is. Sorry, I just missed it. Share. Okay. No, it's not.
Let me share, sir.
There it is.
I can share.
Share करें.
Okay, this is slide 22.
Okay.
Yes, this one I was talking about.
Okay.
So Professor was asking that what do you talk about the NTMs that are the most important to address, if I correctly remember. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first 5 NTMs that we discussed earlier. So according to the import ordinance policy of Pakistan, most of them are introduced like after 2013. So these are the top 5 NTM and the description, what they mean for the government.
Yeah, but I think the question was relating to see what would be the impact, right?
Yeah, also the impact, yes.
Yeah, so these are the top 5 NTMs. The one that Nadeem was concerned about was, I think, related to what is it? I think it was Let me just see. There it is, E316, right? Is it E316 or, yeah, E316. But that, I think you can look at the top 5 products, but looking at their impact, I think it's a very interesting question. We have not, we can work out the coverage ratio and we can work out the frequency index for these, but working out the impact of these individual NTMs, ye mushkil hoga, because what we have done is we have grouped them, and you can see the groups. You can see the groups under the manufacturing sector. And we can give you also, I think if you look at our paper, it outlines the different product groupings that we have been used. We have not done it individually for very specific product.
Okay. Now,
Fine.
ask, sorry, Aziz साहब आप कुछ कह रहे थे?
नहीं ठीक है हो गया समझ आ गया. It's fine.
ठीक है. But Irfan, I wanted to also ask you this thing. I think it's a very good paper. I agree with you. It's wonderful, great piece of work. But let me quickly ask you, what do you think people can carry it forward? What areas do you think our people should explore further in this issue? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, now we can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, what is your question again, Nadeem?
My question is, I think it's a good piece of research, and I would like our people to carry it forward and move forward with this, because there's always further questions that you can answer and further questions that you can take up. For example, one thing is, which is very obvious, is that further detail on the NTMs would be useful. The regulatory impact assessment would be useful. So I just want you to do a little bit of a thought piece, you and Bushra both. Where do you think we can go forward in terms of further research? Because I always think that it's good to get deeper and deeper into a subject.
I would do 2 things, Nadeem. I think the most important thing is, as we discussed earlier, is the regulatory impact assessment. You need to speak to Razak Dawood. I think what we should do is give this. We are planning also to give some this presentation to Razak Dawood. We can arrange it through you. That would be the best thing, first of all. And then based on that, I think your top 6 categories ko aap le lein, 6 or 10 categories ko le lein, usi ko aap leke uska regulatory impact assessment. That will take a time, and it's complex, it's not easy. But wo RIA zarur karna bahut zaruri hai. Maybe you can ask funding from other people to do that, to the World Bank or somewhere else. I know that you don't particularly like doing that, but ye kar sakte hain aap.
Oh, no. Who said we don't like doing that? We like doing that. We have of them, that's a different matter. Getting funding is not a problem.
So I would suggest the first things to do is do RIAs. For number one, talk to Razak Dawood. We can do this presentation to him and jointly do it, and then agree. This is very, ये पाकिस्तान की बात है, ये हमारी बात ही नहीं है. This मेरा और बुशरा की बात नहीं है, ये आपकी बात नहीं है, ये पाकिस्तान के लिए हमें ख्याल करना है कि ये बहुत जरूरी है कि इसको आप एक तो ये agreement होना चाहिए, consensus होना चाहिए at the top. And I will also send an email to Arif Alvi about this issue.
Sure.
But the second thing is that you need to do a regulatory impact assessment of the top 10 categories. And iska kya ho sakta hai? Look at, are they necessary? And if they are not necessary, eliminate them. If they are necessary, how can you can simplify them? And the third thing is, of course, is to harmonize with them with trading partners. उसके बाद एक और जो चीज है वो ये, in terms of this specific piece of work, ये आप कर सकते हैं कि आप you can look at, हमने 2015 तक का हमको data मिला था. Maybe what we should be able to, I'm sure that you need to, maybe you can talk to UNCTAD and they will be able to release the more recent data they have available. If you can update this for 2018, it would be great. I think what you should try to do is to see if you can update it to 18. आपके जो एक और साहब थे जो बात कर रहे थे कि he wants to use the gravity model. I think this is what Key et al. Was also suggesting, the World Bank lady, and who we could, I think would be very useful to see if we can update this thing for. Now, what they were arguing, Key et al. Is arguing is that the developed countries have, and even though they may have the same AVEs, they are better able to manage them than we can. It is at a less cost. तो ये चीज हमारे लिए बहुत expensive है, तो ये चीज उसके लिए. But I think the first step, the third step to do is to try to update this for 2018, more recent data, and share that. But I think order number one, I would say again, go back to Razak Dawood, get him convinced. Number two, regulatory assessment करें और इसको फिर करें. And I think, as I said, we are very concerned कि service sector में भी और ज़्यादा impact आ रहा है. तो it's all very critical to update these things.
Achha, now that I have you here, I also want to use you for another thing if you've got another 15 minutes or so. Sure. Let's have a general discussion on research in Pakistan. Because I want you to comment on the state of research in Pakistan and what you expect from research in Pakistan. How can we be more meaningful? How can we sort of kind of be more effective in terms of our research, in terms of our communication, in terms of our impact on, after all, there's no point in doing research unless you have an impact. So how can we do that? So I want you to do a more general comment on that too. And Bushra, of course, you are welcome to speak too whenever you like. Don't hesitate, don't be shy. Go ahead.
Bushra, do you want to go first?
No, Professor, you should go first.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me now, Nadeem?
We can hear you fine.
Okay. Look, I think that if you, I don't think that the issue is money. I think that the issue is much more the political economy issues involved. And, you know, an organization like yours is should be a primary vehicle to do this type of research in combination with the universities in Lahore and, you know, primary universities in Islamabad and Lahore, Karachi, to coordinate this work. लेकिन उसका ये है कि वो I don't know to what extent. I have not been in Pakistan recently, but वो political economy issue वो resolve करना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि आप जो चीज़ करें उसको it is well received and you have the resources to get this done, and there should be a support to collaborate with others. I don't see a lot of research being done, of high quality research being done, and I think this is where it's very critical to do it. So एक तो ये कि ये political economy issue हो जाना चाहिए. Secondly ये कि obviously resources they are very critical. अब आप, you know, to what extent these resources are available. I mean, you know, I'll give my case myself. You know, I'll be very honest with you. I was interested in coming to Pakistan after my job with the Ministry of Finance in Qatar, but there seemed to be a lot. It's not a very simple way of being able to do this thing, and it's a difficulty. They're involved. All sorts of issues are involved, and there are, you know, people in America, the Gates Foundation or in Saudi Arabia, very keen to get me, and now they have a job offer, then I'm be going over there. So I think even if you get the good researchers to come in, maybe what you can do perhaps is to have them work remotely, and that might be a way to get around this problem. But I really think that if you can identify key areas of research, as PID ये हम 8-10 areas में help चाहते हैं, and then you find a way to solve and have an action plan to solve the problem. That I think would be a first step doing this. Then of course you have to have the political economy issues involved. I really don't know how you can involve get around this political economy issue, given all the discussions that we have been having in the I think in the website that you have set up. But I think it's very critical that we find some way around the problem, the political economy issues, the issue of efficiency, the allocation of resources, and then finding a way in which this can be done effectively. ये बहुत difficult area है, but I think it's very important that it's done. Give me a good example about this under-researched area, and I don't know whether, you know, iska, apart from you, who else would be interested? Although this is critical for Pakistan, इसको कौन इसको आगे बढ़ाएगा? तो हम, Bushra and I really felt it that it was very important. But apart from you, I don't see. I would not be very surprised if there is no interest.
Very sad situation. That is true, unfortunately. Bushra, maybe you want to say something?
Actually, I'm in too early stages of research to say something, but thank you for giving me a chance to talk. I learned a lot from Dr. Irfan, and I'm a graduate of PIDE. I did my MPhil from PIDE, and what I see now that what was there as a student, I can only comment about that. So for the students, of course, I cannot talk about all the industry research that is going on in Pakistan. So it will be really helpful if the students, the areas from the industry are already identified from the Planning Commission and Ministry of Finance, that what the student need to produce. Like, it's not about all the degree what they are getting, but what they are producing, is it the impactful research that is going back into the economy and having an impact on the policy side or in the community side. So that thing now I see is what we need to focus on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But Irfan, going a little deeper, let's look at political economy, is right, but let's look at some other topics, some other themes that you think you're interested in that we should try and work into. For example, one area that you're very interested in that you mentioned to the Prime Minister too, you had a meeting with him, you had a meeting with the Finance Minister, is exports, right? So let's just take the area of exports or whatever other areas. What kind of research should we do in exports to make it effective for us to go out and give a message? Hey, we've got something useful to say. One is what you did just now, which is great. But what other, I mean, I'm also very kind of, you know my background. I'm now getting leery of the fact that people run a regression and pretend that they've got something for Pakistan or something for a country. How do we, what are the key subjects that you think we should address, which are not just regression, but just questions that we need to answer to make the export sector work, or make growth work, or make, for example, public service delivery work, or make, for example, whatever other areas you think. So just your broad, I want big thoughts now from you.
Well, I think on the political economy, I think, again, my experience was that, we in Qatar, about 10 professionals got together and we discussed all these results. And we were very concerned about the export situation in Pakistan. So we looked at we came up with a strategy and we did some presentation and we came to Islamabad and you met us. We met Imran Khan, we met, the Arif Alvi, we met the Minister of Finance and others. And, of course, we were unfortunately, we had this coronavirus put the spanner in the works. But I think there is a tendency to really follow up what the top guy wants, and it may or may not be of interest to everyone. For example, when we went to Imran Khan, he was again I'm not in a position to criticize him, but he was focused entirely on getting money from the diaspora. Right. And that has been, you can see that the result is there. It was very clear. And when we talked to him about that, exports ka ye sabse zyada zaruri hai, so he directed us towards Hafiz Sheikh, and Hafiz Sheikh took us and he was very nice. हम लोग 2-3 हम लोगों ने meetings की और उसने कहा कि हम ये कर सकते हैं, ये करते हैं, आप strategy बना दें. हमने strategy बना के दी, उसका कुछ आगे नहीं हुआ. But I have a feeling that Hafiz is also constrained. If in fact the approach is going to be that you need to follow your master's voice, then I find it very difficult. That's why I was very much hoping that aap jo ye kaam kar rahe hain, that should be able to highlight some of the key areas where you need to do work. This is Bakr needs to look at this issue. I told Bakr about this thing also. I said, look, here it is. The exports need to be improved. Kya kara jaye? I got a very, I didn't get the response that I expected. So again, I think that the problem is that all these people, the top people, are focused on trying to meet what is politically the most important thing, but it's not what is necessarily what is in Pakistan's interest. So exports ke andar sabse zaruri cheez ye hai ki have a clear strategy, have a clear understanding of what are the key drivers which are impacting exports, like this example NTMs, iska kya karna chahiye, iska kya result karna chahiye. And now if at the minimum, agar wo, maybe Imran Khan will learn, and then the government will learn, and maybe they will do something different. But in the meantime, why can't someone like yourself or institute like that pull together and theme and say, look, ye cheez hamare hona chahiye, this is what is needed. I can share with you the export strategy we had outlined, and ye cheez, ye top, ye 5-6 cheezein hain, ye karne chahiye. You should outline it. I don't know. I know that you may have already done this thing, but unless you point the direction about what is needed, I'm afraid कि आगे कुछ नहीं बढ़ेगा.
बिल्कुल सही.
And we've discussed this thing about the IMF and all that, but it's not trying to put the blame on any individual or any institution, but the point is who's going to bell the cat, and that's the problem.
Fair enough. No, bilkul sahi. It's an organic problem. It's our own problem. It's got nothing to do. We criticize the donors for being a part of the problem, not for being the problem. The problem is ours. They are only a part of the problem. So that's fair enough. Okay. Finally, let me ask you a very simple question. Okay, we are doing this. How do we seek international collaborations for our research? Because that's another area that Pakistan has become very isolated in terms of research, in terms of our thinking. We have very few international collaborations. The only collaboration that we have are donor-driven, where we are the junior partners and we are just sort of simple. We just get a fee for doing their TORs. How do we?
Not to go for money. My sense is that if you have a good idea, it will sell itself. I don't think Nadeem ul Haq would give me the time of the day. I'll be very honest with you. If Bushra and I didn't have something sensible that we are putting over here. So in the same way, I would suggest that you need to come up with ideas about where you want to look at and what are the areas, your people should or you should benefit from thoughts on what are the cutting edge issues and how to address them. If you have ideas, then you will find a much greater response than to say to people, okay, we want to collaborate with you. Yeah, humko itna paisa chahiye. Ye sochenge bhai paise lene aa gayenge. But that is not. I think if you focus on the ideas and go, for example, ye NTM ka idea, you pick it up. This is for you. Ye to hum kar rahe hain. This is for Pakistan. Aap isko leke jaye. Aap se kahe dekho ye result hum karna chahte hain aage. So then you will have a much better result than simply saying, okay, ye broad area hai, isko aap kare. So you need to be able to come up with some clear, and I think you have, looking at the discussion that we're having on the website, there are some very clear areas jo help kar sakte hain. Whether it's on exports area or whether it's in terms of energy, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of ye jo naya developments aa raha, in the wake of coronavirus, there is a big question of new technology and how will this new technology impact Pakistan. So the adoption of that technology, it's going to have a major impact. I did some work, or I don't know whether I can share this. I don't know whether I shared this with you, but I did some work on Brookings on what is going to be the impact of these of the technological and behavioral changes as a result of COVID-19 on the GCC countries. And it's very clear that it is so enormous that the IMF predicted that by 2034 GCC wealth will be depleted, zero. And ye ab jo naya jo nikal raha, because of what's happened right now, what your technological and behavioral changes, you could end up with having this thing even brought forward earlier. Now, can you imagine what's going to happen for our immigration, our remittances problem, if in fact the GCC remittances decline to a substantial extent, if not go to zero in about 10 years? Iske par research hona chahiye. So I think again, my sense again is कि इसके ऊपर ideas, and you have a brilliant mind, Nadeem, and why don't you and others on there put together maybe you should have a meeting. आप 8-10 दिन की एक call a workshop in which you can discuss the cutting edge ideas, and then go to different donors, go to different institutions, the World Bank mein jaye aap, go to top universities and say, ye hamara interest hai. And then you should follow that. I'm sorry, I've taken too much time with that.
No. Thanks. I think that's very good. Irfan Sahab, we need you. You are a senior fellow, as you know. We made you a senior fellow, joint appointment, whatever. We are poor people. We can't afford much, but we can at least, rely on your goodwill. Bushra Bibi, we also in Kobe research fellow banayegi, and we have to begin to engage people like you. Aapne jo kaha na ki hum koshish kar rahe network banane ka. What we are trying to do is make a network of Pakistani economists wherever they might be. I mean, nobody, PID, I think is much better off being a platform and a network rather than being a sitting institution. As you know, Brookings has lots of senior fellows who are all over the world. Why can't we do the same thing, right? So we've got a lot of, we are trying to engage people like you. We're trying to learn from you. We've also got a Rasta project, which is trying to fund local research. So we've just gone through the first round of it. We are funding about maybe 15, 20 proposals. Tomorrow we have a meeting. Out of 200 proposals, we've sifted through them over time. So we are trying to create a Pakistani research agenda, and we are trying to create a Pakistani network of research. So that's why people like you are very important to us. We cherish you, and we would like you to remain involved. Whatever ideas you suggest, whatever you suggest is going to be like, absolutely, we will work with you. Whether you want to suggest a conference, webinar, whether you write a paper, whatever, we are totally open. And this is an invitation to all Pakistani economists, like Adil from Oxford, he's one of our people too. We are trying to develop a national narrative, a national dialogue, if we can establish it. And the dialogue is not that something that I can create or anybody can create. It's what we all get together to create. That's why these webinars are important, because here we are trying to bring everybody out. Everybody can say their piece. And then let's see what emerges collectively from us. And I think that's going to be a much more important. When I wrote my book in 2017, I was saying exactly this. It's the policy community that matters. Once you have a policy community, it will impact somebody and the policy. But unfortunately, making a policy community requires a lot of hard work like this, that now you placed NTMs on the table. I think lots of our people will be looking at that. We will be giving it to the government. And let's see how it goes. It's a slow process. It's not immediate. But we'll continue to chip away. And so thank you very much. And we will, inshallah.
Nadeem, can I just mention one thing before you go? I think one should not underestimate the ability or the capacity of Pakistanis who are there. So, bahut underestimation nahi hona chahiye. And I think that should be very important. The second thing is, please, as a follow-up to this webinar, would you like me to take the initiative, or will you take the initiative with Razak Dawood? I would much prefer that. And if we can have a discussion with him about
let's do it. Dono karte. I'm happy to do it. You should do it too, because these guys are hard to get hold of. But I'm happy to start it too. So let's do it. Absolutely. Alvi Saab ko bhi kahe. We can present it to Alvi and Razak Dawood together. Let's do it.
And I think if you can arrange, and the last thing is कि आपके जो लोगों के कुछ दो चार सवाल थे which I have not fully addressed, maybe I didn't fully understand them also. Can you please encourage them to write to me, and I'll be more than happy to respond to that.
Everybody here knows PID के जो senior fellows हैं, they are there for them to collaborate with and seek help from. Okay? So people like yourself are a national resource, and we want to use that resource. So all researchers, I always advise them, okay, please get in touch directly. Talk to people, because half of research is getting good advice, yeah. It's not always just sitting in a desk. It's always getting good advice. I know, for example, lots of people who came through, for example, Alnan Helpman and, Asaf Razin, and all of these people helped improve my work all the time. Every time I did a paper, they came and commented and helped us, So it's a very important thing. Absolutely correct. So that's fine. So great, Irfan Sahab, we'll remain engaged, and inshallah, we'll continue to work together no matter where you are. I wish we were a richer organization, we'd have you with us. But frankly speaking, I can't even hire a bloody RA, leave alone. I can't offer RAs don't that's remarkable. This country has no money for research. But I still don't criticize that. We also have to make a space for ourselves. So I think our job is to make a space for ourselves. Our job is to show people that we mean something. And if we do, then money will follow. And that's what we are trying to do. So thank you. Thank you again. Thank you, Bushra. Thank you, everybody. Inshallah, we'll remain engaged.
Okay. All right. Khuda Hafiz.